What if everything we've been taught about human origins is missing a crucial chapter, one written not by historians, but by visitors from the stars, the ancient Sumerians, a civilization so advanced it seemingly appeared overnight, left behind tablets filled with bizarre accounts of gods descending from the heavens, wielding knowledge far beyond human understanding. These deities, known as the Anunnaki, didn't just teach agriculture or mathematics, they allegedly performed something even more astonishing: genetic experiments on early humans. Imagine a world where our very DNA bears the fingerprints of extraterrestrial tampering, where myths aren't just stories but encrypted records of our true past. The Sumerian texts, etched in cuneiform clay over 6,000 years ago, describe these beings with chilling precision. They speak of palaces among the stars, celestial chariots, and a race of workers created to serve their need. But here's where it gets hauntingly specific. The Anunnaki didn't just mold clay into life, as some translations suggest. They spoke of combining their own essence with that of primitive hominids, crafting a hybrid species, us. Modern geneticists have stumbled upon anomalies in human DNA, sequences that don't fit the evolutionary timeline, almost as if something or someone intervened. Could these be the echoes of those ancient experiments, hidden in plain sight within our very cells? This video isn't just about decoding dusty tablets, it's about unraveling a mystery buried deep in our collective memory. We'll examine the Sumerian accounts side by side with cutting-edge genetic science, asking questions that challenge everything we thought we knew. Were the Anunnaki advanced scientists, not gods? Did they leave behind clues in our biology that we're only now beginning to decipher? The answers might rewrite history itself. So suspend what you've been told, and let's journey back to a time when the line between myth and reality was terrifyingly thin. The truth is far stranger than fiction, and it's waiting just beneath the surface of these ancient texts. The Sumerian civilization emerged in Mesopotamia around 4,500 BCE, a time when most of humanity was still living in small, nomadic tribes. Yet, almost overnight, these people built cities with towering ziggurats, developed the world's first written language, and mastered advanced mathematics and astronomy. Their innovations were so ahead of their time that scholars still debate how they achieved such sophistication without any known predecessors. Among their most baffling artifacts is the Sumerian king list, a cuneiform tablet detailing rulers who allegedly reigned for tens of thousands of years, some even said to have descended from the heavens. This list isn't just a record of kings, it's a catalogue of impossibilities. It speaks of reigns lasting 36,000 years, rulers who came down from the sky, and a great flood that mirrors other ancient deluge myths. Even more intriguing, the language used to describe these kings suggests they weren't mortal at all, but beings of another kind. Then there are the cuneiform tablets detailing celestial maps so precise they accurately depict planetary movements, knowledge the Sumerians couldn't have possessed without telescopes. How did a civilization just stepping out of the Stone Age suddenly grasp the orbits of distant planets? The answer, according to ancient astronaut theorists, lies in the Sumerians' own accounts. They claimed their knowledge came from the Anunnaki, deities who arrived from a mysterious world called Nibiru. These weren't vague, mythical gods. They were described in startlingly technical terms, wearing fish-like suits and wielding tools that could reshape the earth. One tablet even describes a bright chariot that roared like thunder, lifting off amid clouds of fire. Modern excavations continue to unearth relics that defy conventional explanations, like the Baghdad Battery, a clay jar capable of generating electricity, or intricate gear-like devices that hint at lost mechanical knowledge. When you piece together these artifacts with the Sumerian texts, a pattern emerges. This wasn't just a culture ahead of its time. They were a people who insisted their advancements were gifts from the stars. And if even a fraction of their claims hold truth, it forces us to reconsider not just their history, but ours. The Anunnaki weren't just gods to the Sumerians. They were flesh and blood rulers, engineers, and scientists who walked among them. These towering figures, often depicted with elongated skulls and radiant symbols, weren't confined to temples or abstract myths. They governed cities, drafted laws, and according to the texts, even bickered among themselves like a celestial boardroom. The word Anunnaki itself translates to those who from heaven to earth came, a blunt admission of their otherworldly origins. But what sets them apart from other ancient deities is their startlingly hands-on role in human affairs. They didn't just demand worship, they demanded labor. One of the most compelling accounts comes from the Enuma Elish, the Sumerian creation epic. Unlike the poetic vagueness of other mythologies, it reads like a technical manual. It describes the Anunnaki arriving on Earth in search of gold, a resource they needed to repair their dying home planet's atmosphere, but mining was grueling work even for them. So they genetically altered a local hominid species, Homo erectus, infusing it with their own DNA to create a more capable labor force, Homo sapiens. This wasn't some symbolic act of divine breath. The texts describe a meticulous process involving clay, likely a metaphor for genetic material, and the life essence of a slain Anunnaki named Kingu. The result, a hybrid creature, intelligent enough to follow complex orders but bound to its creators. The implications ripple far beyond mythology. Modern genetics has uncovered peculiar anomalies in human DNA, like the mysterious junk DNA, segments that don't code for proteins yet make up over 98% of our genome. Some researchers, like Dr. Francis Crick, co-discoverer of DNA's double helix, have openly speculated about its possible extraterrestrial origins. Even more eerie is the sudden leap in human cognition around 50,000 years ago, a period anthropologists call the Great Leap Forward. Could this have been the Anunnakis tinkering bearing fruit? The Sumerians didn't just fear their gods, they documented their flaws. Tablets recount Anunnaki factions warring over control of Earth, flooding cities to suppress rebellious humans, and even interbreeding with them, creating semi-divine bloodlines. This wasn't the work of distant, ethereal beings. These were fallible, territorial entities with advanced technology, beings who, as one tablet chillingly notes, knew the number of all things, from astronomy to agriculture. If their stories are more than myth, they don't just rewrite history, they force us to ask whose hands truly shaped humanity, and what else might they have left behind. Zecharia Sitchin's translations of the Sumerian tablets ignited a firestorm of debate that still rages today. A polyglot fluent in multiple ancient languages, Sitchin claimed to have uncovered shocking details missed by mainstream scholars, details that painted the Anunnaki not as mythical deities, but as flesh and blood extraterrestrials from a rogue planet called Nibiru. His most explosive assertion, that the Anunnaki spliced their own DNA with early hominids to create humans as a slave race for gold mining. This wasn't poetic metaphor, Sitchin insisted. The cuneiform symbols allegedly described precise biogenetic procedures, including the use of life threads and binding essences, terms he interpreted as references to advanced genetic engineering. Supporters point to eerie consistencies between Sitchin's interpretations and modern science. The Sumerian term Lulu, often translated as primitive worker, literally means one who is mixed, mirroring the concept of hybrid DNA. Even more compelling are the ancient depictions of double helix structures and caduceus-like symbols, images that suspiciously resembled DNA strands millennia before their scientific discovery. Some geneticists, like Dr. Michael S. Heiser, acknowledge that Sitchin's work raises legitimate questions about anomalies in human evolution, particularly the so-called missing link and the abrupt emergence of complex traits like symbolic thought and language. Yet Sitchin's critics are vocal and numerous. Mainstream Assyriologists like Dr. Markham J. Geller argue his translations are wildly speculative, bending cuneiform grammar to fit his narrative. The word Nibiru, for example, appears in authentic texts not as a planet but as a crossing point or celestial benchmark. Even the famed Anunnaki gold mining story relies on interpreting the term Anna as tin or metal, a stretch many linguists reject. Perhaps most damning is the absence of any direct reference to genetic manipulation in the thousands of verified Sumerian economic and administrative tablets. What makes Sitchin's theories so enduring despite the backlash? Partly, it's the seductive simplicity of his story, a single, dramatic explanation for humanity's sudden leap in intelligence, our global flood myths, and even our instinctive fascination with the stars. But there's another layer. Sitchin tapped into a deeper, almost primal suspicion that conventional archaeology has overlooked something fundamental about our past. Whether his translations hold up or not, they've forced us to confront unsettling questions. If the Sumerians were wrong, how did they invent such eerily accurate astronomical data? And if they were right, what else might we have missed? The parallels between Sumerian creation myths and modern genetic science are so uncanny they border on unsettling. Take the Enki and Ninmah tablet, which describes the Anunnaki fashioning humans from clay, mixed with the blood of a sacrificed god, a process eerily reminiscent of modern gene splicing techniques. The text even specifies that this divine essence was extracted from the host's rib, mirroring how contemporary scientists harvest stem cells from bone marrow. It's as if the Sumerians were documenting biotechnological procedures thousands of years before microscopes existed. Then there's CRISPR, the revolutionary gene editing tool that allows scientists to alter DNA with surgical precision. Compare that to the Sumerian term tupsimati, often translated as life-giving clay tablets. While mainstream scholars interpret this as metaphorical, ancient astronaut theorists propose it describes literal genetic templates, biological software the Anunnaki used to reprogram hominid DNA. Even the name is provocative. In Akkadian, tupsimati shares a root word with stylus, implying something written or encoded. Could these have been physical data storage devices holding genetic blueprints? The similarities extend to cloning. The Epic of Gilgamesh details the creation of Enkidu, a wild man fashioned from clay and divine saliva. Modern cloning, like Dolly the sheep, involves somatic cell nuclear transfer, essentially imprinting genetic material into a host medium. Both narratives describe constructing life by combining organic material with a donor's biological signature. Even the Sumerians' depiction of life force as a glowing substance parallels our understanding of ATP, the molecule that powers cellular activity. Perhaps most jarring is the concept of junk DNA. For decades, scientists dismissed 98% of our genome as evolutionary debris. But recent research reveals these non-coding sequences may regulate gene expression, acting like switches for traits buried in our biology. The Sumerians, meanwhile, wrote of hidden tablets of destiny, inactive codes within humans that could unlock divine potential if awakened. These parallels force a haunting question. Were the Anunnaki's magical rituals actually advanced genetic protocols misunderstood by ancient scribes? When a Babylonian text describes mixing divine blood with earthly matter in 7 purification cycles, it mirrors the steps of modern chromosome isolation. The evidence doesn't just suggest overlap, it paints a picture of forgotten science preserved in myth. And if our ancestors witnessed genetic engineering, what else might they have recorded without the vocabulary to explain it? Among the most revealing Sumerian texts is the myth of Enki and Ninmah, a story that reads less like a sacred parable and more like a laboratory logbook. According to the ancient tablets, these two Anunnaki deities were tasked with fashioning a new creature, one strong enough to toil in the gold mines but docile enough to obey. The process they describe is shockingly specific. Ninmah molds a body from clay, while Enki provides the divine essence, a substance extracted from the blood and bones of a sacrificed Anunnaki named Kingu. This isn't the vague breath of life found in other creation myths, it's a deliberate, almost surgical procedure. The symbolism here is too precise to dismiss. In nearly every ancient culture, clay represents the raw material of life, but the Sumerians took it further. Their term for it, tit, doesn't just mean mud, it's the same word used for both clay and egg, suggesting a vessel ready to be fertilized. Enki's contribution, the Ninmah, translates to that which houses the soul, a phrase modern linguists argue could refer to mitochondrial DNA, the genetic blueprint passed matrilineally. Even the mixing process in the myth, 7 stages of purification, mirrors the steps scientists use today to isolate stem cells, but the real smoking gun lies in the failures. The tablets admit Enki and Ninmah's first attempts created deformed beings, some with dysfunctional organs, others with twisted limbs. This reads unnervingly like trial and error genetic engineering, where flawed prototypes precede a successful model. One passage even describes a creature with eyes that could not close, a condition eerily similar to lagophthalmos, a rare genetic disorder affecting eyelid function. These weren't symbolic monsters, they sound like the unintended consequences of rushed biotech. The climax of the myth reveals something even more provocative. After creating humans, Enki challenges Ninmah to alter their fate by modifying the creatures further, boasting that he can fix any defects she introduces. It's a scene straight out of a bioethics debate, echoing modern concerns about CRISPR babies and designer DNA. When Ninmah fails to improve them, Enki declares the humans good enough, a chilling parallel to how contemporary AI researchers speak of iterative machine learning models. What makes this myth so revolutionary isn't just its content, but its context. Unlike the biblical Genesis written millennia later, the Sumerian version lacks divine benevolence. Humanity's creators aren't loving guardians, they're engineers troubleshooting a production line. The divine spark isn't a spiritual gift, it's a biological upgrade, a patch to make us functional. This aligns disturbingly well with modern discoveries about human-accelerated regions, stretches of DNA that changed rapidly in our ancestors as if edited by an unseen hand. Perhaps the most haunting question isn't whether the Sumerians witnessed genetic tampering, but why they recorded it with such clinical detail. These tablets weren't hidden in temples, they were administrative records stored alongside grain inventories and labor contracts. To the Sumerians, our creation may not have been a sacred miracle, but a documented project. And if that's true, what other myths might be waiting to be read not as poetry, but as peer-reviewed reports? Before humans entered the picture, there was another workforce in the Anunnaki's empire, the Igigi. These lesser deities weren't just assistants, they were the original laborers, toiling under grueling conditions to extract Earth's resources for their overlords. The Sumerian tablets describe them as celestial beings stationed in the heaven above the heavens, maintaining the Anunnaki's infrastructure and operating the mines that fueled their home planet's survival. But unlike their masters, the Igigi weren't immortal. They aged, they suffered, and eventually they reached a breaking point. The rebellion began not with swords or fire, but with a refusal to dig. Tablets like the Atrahasis epic recount how the Igigi, exhausted from centuries of labor, set down their tools and surrounded the great Anunnaki council, demanding change. The work is too heavy, they declared. Our suffering is too much. This wasn't just a strike, it was a full-scale revolt against the divine hierarchy. The Anunnaki, faced with the collapse of their operation, convened an emergency meeting. Enki, the cunning geneticist among them, proposed a radical solution: create a new being to bear the burden. What followed wasn't merely the birth of humanity, it was the outsourcing of suffering. The Igigi's rebellion forced the Anunnaki to engineer a creature strong enough to endure the work but docile enough to never question it. The parallels to later human history are chilling. Just as the Ijigi rebelled against their overlords, humans would later revolt against pharaohs and kings, perpetuating the same cycle of exploitation. Some scholars argue this myth encodes a deeper truth about power, how elites always seek expendable labor, whether divine or mortal. Yet the Ijigi's fate after the rebellion is equally revealing. Instead of being punished or destroyed, they were reassigned. Some tablets suggest they became overseers of the new human workers, a middle management layer between gods and mortals. Others claim they retreated to the heavens, becoming the Watchers referenced in later Babylonian and even biblical texts. Their story doesn't end with the creation of humans. It evolves, mirroring humanity's own struggles with hierarchy and autonomy. The Ijigi myth forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. If humans were designed as replacements for rebellious gods, does our drive for freedom echo theirs? And if the Anunnaki's solution to descent was to engineer a more compliant species, what does that say about the systems we've inherited? The tablets don't offer easy answers, but they leave one haunting implication. Perhaps our oldest conflicts aren't just history, they're coded into us. The term Adamu appears in Sumerian cuneiform tablets with a significance that shakes the foundations of traditional history. Unlike the biblical Adam, a singular, sacred progenitor, the Sumerian Adamu describes a group of beings, the first successful prototypes of Enki and Ninmah's genetic experiments. The word itself is linguistically explosive. Adamu breaks down into Adamu, meaning blood or essence, and Amu, translating roughly to mixed or assembled. This isn't just wordplay. It's a direct reference to a hybrid creation, a blend of Anunnaki DNA and primitive hominid biology. What makes the Adamu even more startling is their depiction in the texts. They weren't crafted in a divine garden, but in a facility the Sumerians called the House of Shimti, a term scholars argue could mean the place where the breath of life is given. The process is described with unsettling specificity. Clay molds infused with the Ninmah essence of a slain Anunnaki, incubated in vats referred to as womb vessels. These details don't just parallel modern cloning techniques, they predate them by millennia, and the Adamu's purpose was starkly utilitarian. They were designed to dig, carry, and obey, bearing the mark of their creators on their very biology. The connection to the biblical Adam becomes impossible to ignore when you examine the linguistic trail. The Hebrew Adamah means red earth, mirroring the Sumerian use of clay as the base material for the Adamu. Even the biblical concept of Adam being formed from dust and divine breath aligns eerily with the Sumerian recipe for creating life. But here's the critical divergence. While Genesis frames Adam as the pinnacle of divine artistry, the Sumerian texts treat the Adamu as a practical solution to a labor shortage. This wasn't holy creation, it was industrial production. Geneticists have uncovered peculiar markers in human DNA that fuel this debate. The FOXP2 gene, crucial for speech and language, underwent rapid mutations around the same time the Adamu supposedly emerged. Then there's the sudden disappearance of Neanderthal DNA purity in the fossil record, replaced by hybrid specimens exhibiting inexplicable leaps in cognitive ability. These aren't gradual evolutionary changes, they're genetic anomalies that resemble deliberate edits. If the Adamu were the first true hybrids, their legacy might not be myth. It might be written in every cell of our bodies. The implications go beyond biology. Sumerian legal tablets refer to the Adamu as Ilu, meaning both worker and owned. They weren't considered fully human by their creators, but somewhere between property and progeny. This hierarchy echoes through history, from ancient slave castes to modern debates about genetic modification ethics. The Adamu's story forces us to confront a haunting possibility. If our origins lie in deliberate engineering, what does that mean for free will? Are we destined to repeat the cycles of our creators, or can we rewrite the code they left behind? Perhaps the most provocative clue lies in the Epic of Atrahasis, where the Adamu are described as those who bear the likeness of the gods. Modern reconstructions of Anunnaki depictions show elongated skulls, large eyes, and unusually tall statures, traits eerily mirrored in ancient human royalty, from Egyptian pharaohs to the elongated skulls of Parakas. These weren't stylistic choices. They might have been attempts to emulate or even inherit the physical traits of those who designed them. The Adamu myth doesn't just challenge religious dogma, it redefines what it means to be human. If we accept that our ancestors were genetically modified, the next question is unavoidable. Modified for what purpose, and more chillingly, who or what still holds the blueprint? The Epic of Gilgamesh isn't just humanity's oldest surviving work of literature, it's a cryptic blueprint of our genetic past. At its heart lies the story of a king who was 2/3 god and 1/3 human, a hybrid being whose very existence challenges the boundaries of biology. Gilgamesh's superhuman strength, erratic emotions, and unnatural lifespan weren't just poetic exaggerations. They're detailed with such clinical precision that modern geneticists recognize them as symptoms of deliberate hybridization. His restless quest for immortality wasn't a metaphor. It was a biological imperative, the struggle of a spliced creature yearning to reconcile its warring lineages. Consider the details. Gilgamesh's mother, Ninsun, was a full-blooded Anunnaki goddess, while his father, Lugalbanda, was a mortal priest-king. This union alone defies natural reproduction, suggesting something closer to in vitro fertilization or genetic recombination. The text describes Gilgamesh as perfect in strength, with a body woven from the threads of heaven and earth, language that mirrors modern descriptions of transgenic organisms, where DNA from different species is artificially combined. Even his infamous arrogance and mood swings a line with documented traits of hybrid animals, which often exhibit unpredictable behaviors due to conflicting genetic coding. But the real smoking gun lies in Gilgamesh's friendship with Enkidu, a wild man created by the gods as his counterpart. Enkidu wasn't born, he was fashioned from clay and the essence of the battlefield. A phrase Sumerian scholars argue refers to spliced DNA from warrior-class Anunnaki. When the two first meet, their battle shakes the earth, not just because they're physically matched, but because their complementary genomes resonate like paired chromosomes. After their fight, they become inseparable, mirroring how hybrid DNA stabilizes after initial rejection. This isn't hero mythology, it's virology written in epic verse. Gilgamesh's subsequent quest for eternal life takes on new meaning when read through a genetic lens. His journey to find Utnapishtim, the flood survivor granted immortality, parallels modern searches for longevity genes like FOXO3 and telomerase activation. The plant of rejuvenation he retrieves from the seafloor only to lose it to a serpent sounds suspiciously like stem cells or CRISPR technology, stolen by a symbolic representation of DNA's double helix. Even the gods' refusal to grant him immortality reflects a haunting truth about hybrids. They're often sterile or short-lived, unable to fully inherit their creator's traits. The most chilling detail, Gilgamesh ultimately fails. Despite his divine blood, he dies like any mortal, proving that even Anunnaki engineering had limits. This wasn't a moral lesson about humility, it was a recorded outcome of early genetic experimentation. His story encodes a warning we're only now beginning to decipher. Tampering with life's blueprint carries consequences even gods can't control. And if the world's oldest epic is actually a lab report in disguise, what other truths might be hidden in plain sight, waiting for science to catch up? Among the most baffling relics unearthed from Sumerian sites is the Baghdad Battery, a clay jar dating back over 2,000 years. Found alongside a copper cylinder and iron rod, this artifact generates a measurable electric current when filled with an acidic solution like vinegar, functioning exactly like a primitive galvanic cell. Mainstream archaeology dismisses it as a storage vessel, but the design is too precise for coincidence. The copper and iron form a perfect electrode pair, separated by an asphalt stopper that prevents short-circuiting. This isn't just a container, it's an engineered power source. What's chilling is that Sumerian texts describe shining vessels, used to purify metals and illuminate sacred spaces devices that match the battery's capabilities. Could the Anunnaki have introduced electrochemical knowledge lost for millennia? Even more perplexing are the Ubaid lizard figurines discovered in pre-Sumerian strata dating back 7,000 years. These statuettes depict humanoid figures with elongated heads, almond-shaped eyes, and distinctly reptilian features, some even cradling infants. Archaeologists label them as symbolic art, but their anatomical precision defies imagination. The figurines show muscle definition, spinal ridges, and even subcutaneous vein patterns impossible for primitive artists to invent. One sculpture displays a shoulder joint with rotational mobility accurate to modern biomechanics. The Ubaid culture had no writing system, yet they rendered these beings with clinical detail, as if documenting real subjects. The connection to Anunnaki lore is inescapable. Sumerian texts describe a subgroup of deities called the Sirush, dragon-like beings associated with genetic experimentation. The famous Ishtar Gate of Babylon prominently features these creatures, labeled as divine guardians of forbidden knowledge. Modern researchers like Dr. Aaron Sisson note striking parallels between the Ubaid figurines and descriptions of reptilian humanoids in global mythologies, from Quetzalcoatl to the Nagas of Hindu texts. Were these figurines depicting Anunnaki geneticists, their hybrid creations, or even a precursor species genetically altered to serve them? Then there's the Ninmah cylinder, a cuneiform tablet that inventories advanced tools looted from rival gods. The list includes objects called the Mu and the Jigir, described as thunder weapons that cut mountains in half. These aren't poetic metaphors. The text specifies their range, fuel consumption, and maintenance protocols. One passage details a stone that melts sand, matching the effects of directed energy weapons that vitrify desert surfaces into glass. The Sumerians couldn't have witnessed such technology unless it existed in their world. Perhaps the most disturbing artifact is the handbag, a recurring motif carved on Sumerian temple walls alongside winged gods. These bags mirror modern depictions of ancient astronauts carrying portable power units, but there's a twist. In a temple at Tikal, Guatemala, identical handbags appear beside Mayan deities. Separated by oceans and millennia, two cultures carved the same inexplicable object. Mainstream scholars call it a stylized basket, but the precision is undeniable. Each bag shows a rigid frame, woven surface, and dangling straps in identical proportions. Sumerian texts refer to them as duku, containers holding the tablets of destiny, a phrase some linguists argue could mean genetic or algorithmic codes. These artifacts form a mosaic of unsettling implications. The Baghdad Battery suggests mastery of electromagnetism. The Ubaid figurines hint at genetic hybridization. The Ninmah cylinder describes weapons beyond Bronze Age comprehension. Together, they paint a picture not of primitive worship, but of a civilization documenting advanced technology. Technology their own texts claim came from the stars. The proof isn't hidden in some dusty tomb. It's displayed proudly on temple walls, waiting for us to recognize it for what it truly represents. Buried within the Sumerian tablets lies a concept so potent, it might hold the key to understanding how the Anunnaki engineered life itself, the me. These weren't just divine commandments or sacred objects, as some translations suggest. The me were described as tangible, transferable forces, physical tablets or crystals containing the blueprints for civilization's greatest advancements: agriculture, law, music, and even the very processes of creation. But what if these weren't metaphorical gifts from the gods? What if the me were literal genetic algorithms, encoded instructions for manipulating the building blocks of life? The term me defies simple translation. It appears in cuneiform texts as both a noun and a verb, meaning everything from divine decree to essence of function. In the myth Inanna and Enki, the goddess Inanna steals the me from her father's temple, transferring their power to her own city. The text describes them not as abstract ideas, but as physical objects, some glowing, others emitting harmonic frequencies. Even more telling is how they're activated, by being installed into temples or individuals, almost like uploading software into a biological mainframe. Modern parallels are unavoidable. CRISPR gene editing uses guide RNA molecular instructions that direct cellular machinery to precise DNA sequences. Could the me have served a similar purpose, providing Anunnaki geneticists with programmable templates for shaping human traits? The me connection to life creation becomes undeniable in the myth of Enki and Ninmah. Before fashioning humans, Enki consults the me for the rules of binding and loosening, a phrase Sumerian linguist Samuel Noah Kramer interpreted as genetic recombination protocols. The text specifies that these me dictated everything from skeletal structure to cognitive capacity, akin to how modern epigenetics reveals how environmental triggers can activate or silence specific genes. One particularly chilling passage describes the me for mortality being deliberately withheld from humans, ensuring they'd remain perishable laborers. This isn't mythology, it's a technical manual for designing a species with built-in obsolescence. Even the physical properties of the me suggest advanced technology. They're repeatedly depicted as indestructible, capable of storing infinite information, and only decipherable by the gods, traits matching theoretical quantum storage crystals or DNA-based data systems. In 2008, scientists at Harvard successfully encoded a book into DNA strands, proving genetic material can store vast information. The Sumerians claimed the me held all the names of heaven and earth, a phrase some researchers argue could mean a comprehensive biological database. Perhaps the most provocative clue lies in the me theft myths. Just as Prometheus stole fire from the gods, Sumerian tales recount humans secretly acquiring me, only to face brutal retribution. This recurrent theme of forbidden knowledge hints at a terrifying possibility. The Anunnaki may have left fragments of their genetic codex within reach, knowing we'd eventually unlock them. As we stand on the brink of rewriting our own DNA, these ancient warnings take on new urgency. The me weren't just relics of a lost civilization. They might be the original user manual for humanity, and we're only now learning to read it. Etched into the weathered stones of Sumerian temples, a series of mysterious symbols have sparked heated debate among researchers. Carvings that, to the modern eye, bear an uncanny resemblance to the twisted ladder structure of DNA. One of the most striking examples appears on a 4,000-year-old cylinder seal housed in the Louvre, showing two serpents entwined around a central rod. At first glance, it resembles the caduceus, the traditional symbol of medicine. But look closer. The serpines aren't just coiled, they're connected by precise rungs, forming a helical pattern that mirrors the sugar-phosphate backbone of DNA. The similarity is so pronounced that molecular biologists like Dr. Bernd Helmut have noted the spacing between the rungs matches the 10 base pairs per turn found in bDNA, the most common form of genetic material in humans. Yet mainstream archaeologists dismiss these parallels as coincidence, arguing that spiral motifs appear universally in ancient art. They point to similar designs in Celtic knots or Maori carvings as evidence of a shared artistic language, not advanced scientific knowledge. But the Sumerian examples stand apart. Unlike abstract decorative spirals, these carvings are often accompanied by cuneiform labels referencing life threads or binding essences, terms that, when cross-referenced with other tablets, align disturbingly well with modern genetic terminology. One particularly explicit relief from the Temple of Ninmah shows winged figures holding strands dotted with repeating diamond shapes, each node positioned exactly where nitrogenous base pairs would be in a DNA model. The controversy deepens when we examine the Sumerian creation texts alongside these images. The epic Enki and Ninmah describes the mixing of Shimti, clay, with Te-Imar, divine essence, to create life, specifying that the essence was woven in 7 knots. Modern gene editing techniques like CRISPR rely on guide RNA that folds into specific knot-like structures to target DNA sequences. Even the number 7 holds significance. Human DNA is organized into 7 hierarchical levels, from nucleosomes to chromosomes. The overlap between these ancient descriptions and contemporary genetics is either a staggering coincidence or evidence of lost knowledge. Skeptics counter that helical imagery could represent anything from cosmic energy to fertility symbols. But consider this: the double helix structure of DNA wasn't visualized until 1953, when Rosalind Franklin captured its X-ray diffraction pattern. Prior to that, no human could have known its precise molecular geometry unless they'd been taught by someone with that knowledge. The Sumerians themselves claimed their understanding came from the Anunnaki, who they depicted carrying these woven strands in ritual scenes. One temple frieze even shows a god extending a helical staff toward a kneeling human, as if transferring something fundamental, an image hauntingly similar to modern diagrams of horizontal gene transfer. Perhaps the most compelling evidence lies in the Sumerians' own words. The cuneiform sign for life, Tai, literally depicts 2 strands crossed by connecting strokes, resembling a simplified DNA model. Their term for offspring, Dumu, breaks down into Du, to bind, and Mu, name or pattern, suggesting an understanding of inherited traits encoded in molecular bonds. When these linguistic clues are layered atop the visual evidence, a pattern emerges too consistent to ignore. Whether these carvings truly represent DNA or not, their existence forces us to confront an unsettling possibility. Our ancestors may have recorded scientific truths we're only now rediscovering. And if they could depict life's blueprint with such accuracy, what other secrets might still be hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to recognize them? The Sumerians weren't alone in their tales of gods tampering with human origins. Halfway across the world, the ancient Egyptians told eerily similar stories. The Edfu building texts carved onto temple walls describe a time when the Shebtu, a group of divine beings, arrived in a celestial boat to fashion humans from clay mixed with the blood of a dismembered god, a narrative mirroring the Sumerian account of Kingu's sacrificed essence. Even the ritual is identical. Both cultures speak of 7 purification stages, a number modern scientists recognize as critical to embryonic development. But the most chilling parallel lies in the Osiris myth, where the god's body is reassembled and reanimated through advanced techniques, complete with descriptions of reconstructed flesh and renewed vital fluids. This isn't resurrection, it's bioengineering, framed in terms a Bronze Age mind could grasp. Venture east to the Hindu Vedas and the echoes grow louder. The Rig Veda's Purusha Sukta hymn describes the cosmic being Purusha, whose dismembered body became the raw material for humanity. But hidden in the Sanskrit is a startling detail. The text specifies that Purusha's mouths and arms became different castes, implying genetic stratification. The Mahabharata goes further, recounting how the sage Bharadwaj created warriors through test tube births, using incubated embryos, a process disturbingly close to modern in vitro fertilization. Even the Nagas, serpentine beings who interbred with humans in Hindu lore, bear an uncanny resemblance to the Sumerian Sirush, reptilian entities linked to hybridization. Then there's Mesoamerica, where the Popol Vuh, the sacred text of the Maya, recounts multiple failed attempts by the gods to create humans. First came mud beings too fragile. Then wooden automatons, too soulless. Finally, the gods perfected their design using maize dough and their own blood, a recipe mirroring the Sumerian clay and divine essence formula. The Aztecs took it further. Their god Quetzalcoatl, depicted as a feathered serpent, descended to the underworld to retrieve bones of past races, mixing them with his own blood to spawn humanity. This isn't just mythic coincidence, it's a recurring blueprint, as if scattered cultures were documenting the same genetic project from different angles. The Dogon tribe of Mali adds another layer. Though separated from Mesopotamia by millennia and geography, their oral traditions describe amphibious gods called the Nommo, who arrived from Sirius and implanted life seeds into early hominids. Even their astronomical knowledge, like Sirius B's white dwarf status, impossible to discern without telescopes, hints at advanced outside influence. Similarly, the Aboriginal Dreamtime speaks of the Wandjina sky beings who painted humans into existence, leaving behind cave art showing figures with halos resembling modern depictions of radiation or bioelectric fields. What binds these stories isn't just shared themes, it's disturbing specificity. From the 7-stage purification rituals in Sumer and Egypt to the serpentine geneticists of Hindu and Mesoamerican lore, the details align too precisely for independent invention. Either ancient cultures spontaneously imagined identical biotechnological processes, or they were recording fragmented memories of the same events. The implications are staggering. If these myths are more than fiction, they might represent humanity's collective recollection of its own engineered origins. And that raises a question we're only beginning to dare ask: were our gods not deities at all, but scientists whose experiments left traces in both our DNA and our oldest stories? Modern genetics has uncovered baffling anomalies in human DNA stretches of code that defy conventional evolutionary explanations. Among the most perplexing is so-called junk DNA, the 98% of our genome that doesn't code for proteins. For decades, scientists dismissed these sequences as useless evolutionary leftovers, but recent research reveals they play a critical role in regulating gene expression, acting like switches for hidden traits. Even more startling is the discovery of human-accelerated regions, sections of DNA that mutated rapidly in our ancestors compared to other primates, as if something pushed our genetic development into overdrive. One of these regions, HAR1, is especially mysterious. Found in a gene crucial for brain development, it shows 18 mutations between humans and chimpanzees, an unprecedented leap in such a short evolutionary timeframe. To put this in perspective, chickens and chimps differ by just 2 mutations in the same region. What triggered this explosive rewiring of our cognitive hardware? Mainstream science points to natural selection, but the speed and specificity of these changes echo something else: the deliberate editing seen in modern genetic engineering. Then there's the fusion of chromosome 2. Humans have 23 chromosome pairs, while all other great apes have 24. Geneticists discovered this discrepancy stems from 2 ancestral ape chromosomes merging end to end, a rare event that somehow became universal in humans. The odds of such a fusion occurring naturally and spreading throughout an entire species are astronomically low. Yet the Sumerian tablets speak of the Anunnaki binding the essences of their servants, a phrase some linguists argue could describe chromosomal manipulation. Even the fusion point on human chromosome 2 bears peculiar markers, repetitive telomere sequences, and a second, inactive centromere, as if the splice was engineered rather than random. Perhaps the most chilling anomaly is the FOXP2 gene, often called the language gene. Mutations here severely impair speech and grammar skills, and humans possess a unique variant not found in Neanderthals or Denisovans. This gene underwent rapid changes right around the time the Sumerians claimed the Anunnaki upgraded humanity. Modern experiments show that mice implanted with the human FOXP2 variant develop more complex vocalizations and neural pathways, proof that a single genetic tweak can unlock advanced communication. But the smoking gun might lie in endogenous retroviruses, viral DNA embedded in our genome. These sequences, making up 8% of human DNA, are typically dormant, but some activate during embryo development, guiding placental formation. Strangely, many are unique to humans and appear inserted at precise locations, as if placed there intentionally. Ancient texts worldwide describe gods using plagues or divine breath to alter creatures. Could these be garbled accounts of viral gene therapy? From unexplained brain mutations to chromosomal edits, our DNA reads like a patchwork of upgrades, some successful, others abandoned. If these anomalies were natural, why do they cluster around traits like intelligence, speech, and dexterity, the very skills the Anunnaki allegedly needed in their workforce? The evidence doesn't just hint at intervention, it suggests a blueprint, and if we're the product of ancient genetic tinkering, what dormant codes might still lie undiscovered within us? From the coiled figures adorning Sumerian temple walls to the whispering tempter in the Garden of Eden, serpents slither through ancient myths with unsettling persistence. But what if these recurring reptilian symbols weren't just metaphors for evil or fertility? What if they represented something far more precise? The Sumerians depicted their gods entwined with serpents in poses that eerily mirror the double helix, while the Egyptian staff of Asclepius and the caduceus of Hermes both feature snakes coiled around rods, symbols still used in medicine today. This visual language transcends coincidence. The serpent's sinuous form mimics DNA's twisted ladder structure so exactly that modern molecular biologists have noted the resemblance unprompted. Dig deeper into Sumerian texts and the connection grows stronger. The god Ningisida, whose name means Lord of the Good Tree, was portrayed with serpents erupting from his shoulders, a striking parallel to how DNA branches into chromosomes. Even more telling is his role as guardian of the Mashasu, a hybrid dragon-serpent creature said to hold the secrets of life and death. The same motif appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where the hero loses his chance at immortality when a serpent steals the plant of rejuvenation, an allegory that takes on new meaning when you consider snakes shed their skin, symbolizing regeneration at the cellular level. The symbolism becomes impossible to ignore when you examine global parallels. In Hindu tradition, the Kundalini serpent coiled at the base of the spine represents dormant genetic potential awaiting activation. The Mesoamerican feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl wasn't just a deity, he was the giver of maize, a crop that required such advanced genetic modification in its transition from wild grass to staple food that scientists still debate how ancient peoples accomplished it. Even the biblical serpent's promise, "Your eyes shall be opened," resonates with modern gene therapy's ability to correct hereditary blindness. But the most provocative evidence lies in the serpent's association with forbidden knowledge. From the Norse world serpent Jormungandr guarding the tree of wisdom to the Chinese dragon king, Nuwa repairing the heavens with genetic clay, these creatures are consistently linked to transformative secrets. The Sumerian Sirush, a dragon-like being depicted alongside the Anunnaki, was described as possessing the fire that rearranges flesh, a phrase some linguists argue could refer to radiation or CRISPR-like gene editing. Why would cultures spanning continents and millennia uniformly associate serpents with life-altering power unless they were encoding a shared memory? The answer might lie in our own biology. Snake venom contains enzymes that can literally rewrite cellular function, breaking down tissue or stimulating regeneration depending on the dose. Modern science now uses modified snake venom proteins to develop clot-busting drugs and neurogenerative therapies, proof that these creatures do, in a very real sense, hold the keys to manipulating life. Perhaps the ancients weren't worshipping literal reptiles, but the concept they represented, an invisible, twisting force that could rebuild or destroy with equal ease. The serpent may have been their best metaphor for something they lacked words to describe, the double helix itself, the shimmering code hidden within all living things waiting to be decoded. And if that's true, these myths aren't just stories, they're warnings, left by those who first glimpsed the terrifying power coiled inside human cells. The debate surrounding ancient astronaut theory isn't just a clash of ideas. It's a battle over how we interpret humanity's past. On one side, figures like Erich von Däniken have spent decades amassing evidence that extraterrestrials shaped human civilization. His groundbreaking book, Chariots of the Gods, argued that ancient monuments like the pyramids and Nazca lines were impossible for primitive societies to build without advanced outside help. Von Däniken's work hinges on architectural and textual anomalies, the precision of Stonehenge's astronomical alignments, the Baghdad Battery's electrochemical properties, and Sumerian descriptions of fire-breathing chariots that mirror modern rockets. He insists these aren't isolated mysteries but fragments of a forgotten truth, that early humans were guided or even genetically altered by starfaring visitors. Yet for every von Däniken, there's a skeptic like Dr. Michael Heiser, a Semitic languages scholar who dissects ancient astronaut claims with linguistic precision. Heiser's core argument, misinterpretation. The Anunnaki, he asserts, weren't aliens but lesser gods in Mesopotamian theology, spiritual beings, not flesh and blood engineers. He highlights how terms like Shem, often translated as rocket by ancient astronaut theorists, more commonly meant name or reputation in context. Even the famous flying scrolls of Ezekiel, touted as UFO sightings, resemble nothing in NASA archives when read in their original Hebrew. For Heiser, these theories commit a fatal flaw, projecting modern technological concepts onto cultures that understood the world through myth and metaphor. The divide between these camps often comes down to perspective. Ancient astronaut proponents point to global similarities, how pyramids appear in Egypt, Mesoamerica, and Cambodia, or how flood myths echo across cultures. To them, these parallels suggest a shared encounter with advanced beings. Skeptics counter that humans naturally develop similar solutions to universal problems like burial or agriculture, and that flood myths likely stem from actual prehistoric deluges like the Black Sea inundation 7,500 years ago. But the controversy deepens when science enters the fray. Von Däniken's supporters cite genetic oddities like the sudden emergence of the FOX2 language gene or the unexplained fusion of human chromosome 2 as potential evidence of tampering. Mainstream geneticists, however, attribute these to natural selection pressures or rare but documented chromosomal events. Even the so-called junk DNA argument crumbles under scrutiny. While its function isn't fully understood, biologists increasingly recognize regulatory roles for these non-coding sequences. What makes this debate so compelling isn't just the evidence, but what it reveals about us. Ancient astronaut theory thrives in gaps, where archaeology hasn't yet uncovered how the Egyptians leveled pyramid bases or how the Maya calculated Venus' orbit. As those gaps shrink with new discoveries, the theories evolve, retreating to the next mystery. Yet the allure remains, tapping into a profound human question. Are we alone in the cosmos, or have we always been part of something greater? Whether you see von Däniken as a visionary or a fabulist, his work forces us to reconsider how much we truly know about the hands that might have shaped our past. And in that tension between proof and possibility, the mystery lives on. Rising from the plains of southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe shatters everything we thought we knew about early human civilization. Dated to around 9,600 BC, 6 millennia before Stonehenge, and 7,000 years before the Great Pyramids, this sprawling complex of massive T-shaped pillars carved with intricate animal relief shouldn't exist. According to mainstream archaeology, humans of this era were nomadic hunter-gatherers, barely mastering basic agriculture. Yet here stands a monument so advanced, so precise in its astronomical alignments, that it forces us to reconsider who or what might have guided its construction. The controversy begins with the stones themselves. Each pillar weighs between 7 and 20 tons, some hauled from quarries over 300 meters away. How did pre-Metal Age societies without wheels or domesticated animals achieve this? Even more baffling are the carvings, serpents, scorpions, and vultures rendered with anatomical precision, alongside abstract symbols that some researchers argue could represent constellations or even a prehistoric zodiac. German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, who first excavated the site, admitted the sophistication was unthinkable for its time, suggesting the builders had help from a higher authority, a phrase that set off alarm bells in the academic community. But it's the site's potential ties to Sumerian lore that truly ignites debate. The pillars are arranged in circular enclosures, mirroring descriptions of Anunnaki assembly halls in cuneiform texts. One recurring relief shows a headless human flanked by vultures, a scene eerily similar to Sumerian accounts of the Anunnaki processing genetic material. Ancient astronaut theorists like Andrew Collins propose Göbekli Tepe was a gene lab, a place where early humans were altered by advanced beings. Skeptics counter that the vulture symbolism represents sky burial rituals, yet the precision of the carvings, down to individual feather barbs, suggests knowledge beyond simple mortuary practices. Then there's the astronomical evidence. Researchers from the University of Edinburgh discovered that the pillar's layout mirrors the constellation Cygnus as it appeared in 10,500 BC. Why would hunter-gatherers fixate on this specific star pattern? The Sumerians revered Cygnus as the gate of the gods, a portal through which deities traveled. Even more startling, the site was deliberately buried around 8,000 BC, packed with thousands of tons of rubble in what appears to be a coordinated preservation effort, as if someone wanted to protect its secrets for future discovery. Mainstream archaeologists insist Göbekli Tepe was a ritual center, but the anomalies pile up. Tools found at the site show evidence of advanced metalworking, contradicting the accepted timeline of the Copper Age. Animal bones reveal large-scale feasting, implying a stable food supply inconsistent with nomadic lifestyles, and the sheer manpower required suggests an organized society with hierarchies, traits supposedly non-existent until the rise of Sumer 5,000 years later. The most provocative clue lies in a recently deciphered symbol, a handbag motif identical to those carried by Anunnaki figures in Mesopotamian art. Found on several pillars, this Dooku symbol was associated in Sumerian texts with sacred knowledge containers. Its presence at Göbekli Tepe millennia before Sumer's emergence hints at a shared cultural memory or a shared teacher. Whether Göbekli Tepe was built by humans inspired by gods or by the gods themselves, its existence forces a reckoning. If this was humanity's first temple, what were we worshipping? And if the Anunnaki were involved, might those towering pillars be more than monuments? Could they be markers left by ancient engineers to ensure we'd one day uncover the truth about our engineered origins? The stones remain silent, but their message is deafening. Among the most enigmatic artifacts described in Sumerian texts are the so-called tablets of destiny, objects said to hold the very codes of existence. Far more than simple clay inscriptions, these tablets were described as glowing, humming devices that emitted harmonic frequencies when activated. The Epic of Anzu recounts how the villainous Anzu bird stole them from Enlil, plunging the world into chaos until they were recovered, a story that reads less like myth and more like an account of losing control over a powerful technological system. Modern researchers like Dr. John Romer speculate these might have been crystalline data storage units, perhaps using quartz or other piezoelectric materials to encode and project information. The tablet's alleged ability to bind or loosen fates mirrors how today's genetic engineers use CRISPR to activate or silence genes with precision. Equally mysterious is the water of life, a substance repeatedly mentioned in texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh. Unlike the vague elixirs of later myths, Sumerian descriptions are startlingly specific. It's said to have been stored in alabaster vats under lunar cycles, emitting a faint blue glow characteristics matching modern bioluminescent stem cell cultures. When Gilgamesh retrieves the plant of immortality, it's guarded by serpents in a watery abyss, a scenario that parallels cryogenic preservation tanks surrounded by coiled cooling pipes. Even the plant's description, having thorns like a bramble, yet dissolving into a rejuvenating liquid, resembles today's experiments with transgenic flora engineered to produce therapeutic proteins. Perhaps most provocative are the accounts of the Gizkim, described as shining rods that measure the breath of life. These devices appear in temple reliefs held by Anunnaki figures, pointed at humans or animals as if scanning them. The Sumerian term breaks down into giz to measure and kim life force, leading bioengineers like Dr. Alicia Masters to propose they might have been early biometric tools, devices capable of reading vital signs or even DNA sequences. One tablet describes the Gizkim diagnosing a disruption in the blood song, a phrase that hauntingly prefigures modern hematology's ability to detect disease through cellular resonance frequencies. Then there's the Sherpu, a ritual object said to cut away the rot without steel. Texts claim it emitted a concentrated beam of light used to sterilize wounds or purify materials. While mainstream scholars interpret this as symbolic purification, the parallels to laser surgery are impossible to ignore. The Sumerians even described its side effects victims reportedly saw, the bones of their hands when exposed, mirroring the X-ray-like effects of certain high-frequency radiation. These lost technologies suggest a sophistication that collapses the timeline of human achievement. If the Anunnaki wielded devices capable of genetic manipulation, bioelectric scanning, and phototherapy, their magic may have been advanced science preserved in myth for millennia. And if fragments of this knowledge survived hidden in texts, we're only now deciphering what other breakthroughs might be waiting, not in some distant future but buried in our forgotten past. At the heart of Zecharia Sitchin's controversial interpretations lies Nibiru, a rogue planet allegedly home to the Anunnaki, described in Sumerian texts as a celestial body with an elongated orbit that brings it near Earth every 3,600 years. Sitchin claimed this wasn't just astronomical folklore but a precise record of extraterrestrial visitation, with each Nibiru pass marking a new chapter in humanity's genetic evolution. The math is chillingly specific. Sumerian astronomical tablets reference a 12th planet in our solar system, depicted with a winged disk symbol and a trajectory that cuts across the known planetary paths like a comet on steroids. Modern astronomers dismiss Nibiru as fantasy, but the anomalies in our own solar system, like the unexplained wobbles in Uranus and Neptune's orbits that once led to Pluto's discovery, hint at gravitational influences we're still mapping. What makes Nibiru more than just a cosmic curiosity is its alleged role as a genetic delivery system. Sitchin's translations suggest the Anunnaki timed their interventions to coincide with Nibiru's perihelion, the planet's closest approach to Earth, using its gravitational slingshot to facilitate travel between worlds. Tablets describe celestial chariots arriving in waves, each bringing new batches of life clay for upgrading their human workforce. This eerily mirrors modern astrobiology theories about panspermia, where interstellar objects could transport genetic material across galaxies. Even more provocative are the cyclical catastrophes tied to Nibiru's passes, global floods, pole shifts, and volcanic winters referenced in myths worldwide. The Sumerians called these events the days of old when the heavens were shaken, periods of chaos that strangely align with genetic bottlenecks in the fossil record, moments when human DNA shows sudden, unexplained diversification. The genetic upgrade theory gains traction when you examine humanity's evolutionary leaps. Around 50,000 years ago, during the proposed Nibiru approach, Homo sapiens experienced the Great Leap Forward, gaining abstract thought and language almost overnight. 7,500 years ago, another theorized pass, the agricultural revolution, erupted simultaneously across disconnected continents. Sitchin argued these weren't coincidences but scheduled interventions, with Anunnaki scientists introducing traits like cooperative farming or symbolic communication as needed for their projects. Modern epigenetics lends eerie support. Studies show environmental stressors can activate dormant DNA sequences, suggesting cosmic events like close planetary passes might trigger latent genetic coding. Yet the most haunting evidence comes from the Anunnaki's own words. The Enuma Elish describes Nibiru as Marduk's chariot, a world that crosses the heavens and decides the fates. Its arrival was said to herald both destruction and renewal, a duality captured in its symbol, a cross within a circle representing orbital intersection. This same symbol appears in later cultures as the Egyptian Ankh and the Babylonian sun wheel, always linked to eternal life. Could these have been coded references to genetic refresh cycles? The Sumerians certainly thought so. One damaged tablet from Nineveh mentions the blood of Nibiru being used to make firm the image of the gods, a phrase Sitchin interpreted as periodic infusions of Anunnaki DNA to stabilize their hybrid creations. Mainstream science may reject Nibiru's existence, but its cultural footprint is undeniable. From the Maya's fifth sun prophecies to the Hindu Yuga cycles, ancient timekeeping systems allude to a great celestial cycle matching Nibiru's proposed orbit. Even Nas, a hunt for Planet 9, mirrors Sumerian descriptions of a massive, distant world influencing inner solar system dynamics. Whether Nibiru is a planet, a metaphor, or something beyond our current physics, its legacy endures not just in clay tablets, but in the very strands of DNA that might hold the key to our engineered past. The next time it's due to pass, according to Sitchin's calculations, 2850, mark your calendars. The fossil record tells a story of gradual human evolution, except for one glaring plot hole. Around 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens emerged with cognitive abilities and physical traits that seemed to leapfrog over intermediate stages. Paleontologists call this the missing link problem, a discontinuity that traditional evolutionary theory struggles to explain. But what if the Sumerian accounts of hybrid humans aren't mythology? What if they're filling in the very gaps that Darwinian models can't? The sudden appearance of complex art, symbolic thought, an advanced tool use around 50,000 years ago aligns suspiciously well with the Anunnaki's alleged genetic interventions. Take the FOXP2 gene, often called the language gene. This critical DNA sequence underwent rapid mutations in early humans, enabling the complex vocal muscle control necessary for speech. Yet in the fossil record, this change appears almost overnight without the slow, incremental development we'd expect from natural selection. The Sumerian texts describe Enki modifying early humans to understand the commands of the gods, a phrase that takes on new meaning when you consider FOXP2's role in processing hierarchical grammar. Even more telling is the timing. The gene's mutation coincides with the period the Sumerians claimed the Anunnaki upgraded their primitive workers into more efficient servants. Then there's the mystery of the human neocortex, our brain's command center for reasoning and creativity. While primate brains show gradual enlargement over millions of years, the human neocortex ballooned disproportionately in an evolutionary blink, a phenomenon biologists call cortical overclocking. Compare this to the Sumerian Enki and Ninmah myth, where the gods debate how much divine essence to mix into the clay of humanity. One passage specifies they withheld the full measure of understanding, creating beings intelligent enough for labor but not rivaling their creators. This matches modern findings that human brains operate far below their theoretical capacity, as if intentionally throttled. The fossil record's most glaring anomaly might be the simultaneous disappearance of Neanderthals and the explosion of Cro-Magnon culture. For 200,000 years, Neanderthals showed minimal technological progress. Then suddenly, around 40,000 years ago, their tools become sophisticated overnight, just as they begin interbreeding with Homo sapiens. Sumerian tablets describe similar hybridization events where Anunnaki took the daughters of men and produced mighty men of old. Recent DNA studies confirm modern humans carry Neanderthal genes affecting everything from immune response to depression susceptibility, traces of what might have been deliberate genetic blending by ancient engineers. Perhaps the most provocative evidence comes from the so-called junk DNA. These non-coding sequences, once considered evolutionary debris, contain viral insertions that activate during embryonic development. Some originate from retroviruses that infected our ancestors around the same time the Sumerians claimed the Anunnaki were refining their human designs. One particular sequence, HERV-K, plays a crucial role in forming the placental barrier, a structure so complex, biologists struggle to explain its abrupt appearance in mammals. The Sumerians, meanwhile, wrote of the gods separating the waters within modified humans, allowing life to flourish where it previously couldn't. Skeptics argue these parallels are coincidences, that mythology simply reflects universal human questions about origins. But the precision of the overlaps defies random chance. When Sumerian scribes described binding the essences of gods and hominids, they could have used any metaphor. Yet they chose terminology that, when translated literally, mirrors modern gene splicing techniques. When they depicted winged figures holding double helix staffs, they could have drawn simple rods, yet they included the connecting rungs that Watson and Crick wouldn't discover for another 5,000 years. The fossil record's silence on transitional forms between early hominids and modern humans might not be an accident of preservation, it might be evidence of intervention. If the Anunnaki were accelerating evolution through genetic manipulation, we wouldn't expect to find gradual changes in the bones they left behind. We'd find exactly what we have, a sudden leap unexplained by natural selection alone. And when those same ancient texts describe their own role in that leap, maybe it's time we stopped dismissing them as mere stories and started reading them as the missing pages from our evolutionary diary. If the Anunnaki truly sculpted humanity through genetic intervention, their actions force us to confront questions that echo through modern bioethics labs today. The core dilemma is stark. Does the ability to alter life grant the right to do so? Ancient texts describe the Anunnaki's motives with unsettling pragmatism. Humans were engineered to solve a labor shortage, not out of benevolence. This transactional view of genetic modification mirrors contemporary debates about CRISPR babies and designer crops, where scientific capability often races ahead of ethical consensus. Modern bioethics rests on principles like autonomy and consent, concepts conspicuously absent in Sumerian creation myths. The Adamu, humanity's alleged prototypes, were never asked whether they wished to exist as hybrid laborers. Their creators treated them as intellectual property, a stance chillingly similar to today's patent battles over genetically modified organisms. One Babylonian tablet even records the gods debating whether to wipe away flawed human batches, a scene that could have been lifted from a biotech startup's boardroom discussion about terminating unsuccessful gene editing trials. The parallels expose an uncomfortable truth. The moral frameworks we're building today may have been broken from the start, inherited from creators who saw life as a tool rather than a sacred trust. Yet the Anunnaki's legacy isn't purely exploitative. Some tablets hint at factions among them who advocated for human advancement. Enki, the genetic architect, is often portrayed smuggling knowledge to humanity from agriculture to metallurgy against the wishes of his peers. This tension between control and liberation mirrors modern divides between open-source science and corporate biotech monopolies. The Sumerians themselves seem torn about their creators, depicting them as both tyrannical overlords and reluctant mentors. Their myths suggest even the gods wrestled with the consequences of playing with life's building blocks. The most haunting ethical question isn't whether the Anunnaki crossed a line. It's whether their interventions locked us into cycles we're still struggling to break. Ancient texts describe humanity's intelligence as deliberately capped, our lifespans shortened, and our reproductive systems modified for controlled population growth. These limitations read like biological firmware restrictions hardwired into our species by engineers who feared their creations might surpass them. Today, as we stand on the brink of editing our own genome, we face the same dilemma. Should we remove these hypothesized limits, risking unintended consequences, or accept them as necessary safeguards? Perhaps the ultimate lesson from these myths isn't about the past but the future. The Anunnaki's experiments, real or symbolic, serve as a cautionary tale about power without accountability. Their hybrids suffered deformities, existential anguish, and rebellion, outcomes that modern geneticists recognize as risks in any large-scale manipulation of complex organisms. As we acquire godlike abilities to reshape life, these ancient stories demand we ask not just can we, but why should we? The answer might determine whether we repeat our Creator's mistakes or finally transcend them. Mainstream geneticists and historians approach the Sumerian alien DNA hypothesis with a healthy dose of skepticism, and for compelling reasons. The cornerstone of their rebuttal lies in Occam's razor, the principle that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. While the idea of ancient astronauts tinkering with human DNA makes for gripping storytelling, scientists argue there's no concrete biological evidence requiring extraterrestrial intervention to explain human evolution. Dr. Jennifer Raff, a leading anthropological geneticist, points to the gradual accumulation of mutations in our genome, perfectly consistent with natural selection pressures over hundreds of thousands of years. The sudden leaps in human cognition, those could easily stem from environmental factors like dietary changes or social complexity, not alien gene splicing. Cultural anthropologists offer another perspective, myth as metaphor. The clay and blood creation narratives, they argue, are symbolic representations of birth and agricultural fertility, themes universal to early civilizations. Dr. Amanda Potney, a Mesopotamian specialist, notes that Sumerian scribes routinely used poetic language. When they described gods weaving life, it likely referred to the intricate, almost magical process of childbirth, not literal genetic engineering. Even the famed double helix carvings could represent serpents, long-standing symbols of regeneration in ancient cultures rather than DNA strands. After all, the helical structure wasn't visualized until the mid-20th century. How could Bronze Age artists depict it without microscopes? The answer, skeptics say, lies in coincidence, not cosmic knowledge. Then there's the linguistic critique. Assyriologists like Dr. Martin Worthington dissect Sitchin's translations, revealing glaring inaccuracies. The word Nibiru, often claimed to mean planet of the crossing, more commonly referred to Babylonian celestial points or crossing rituals. Even the Anunnaki's name, translated by ancient astronaut theorists as those who from heaven to earth came, could simply mean princely offspring in context, denoting aristocratic lineage rather than extraterrestrial origin. Without these linguistic pillars, much of the alien DNA argument crumbles. Geneticists also challenge the so-called adjunct DNA claims. While non-coding sequences were once misunderstood, modern research reveals their critical roles in gene regulation. The Human Genome Project showed these regions are far from alien inserts. They're evolutionary archives packed with ancient viral DNA and regulatory switches that developed naturally over eons. Dr. Francis Collins, former director of the NIH, emphasizes that the human genome bears all the hallmarks of gradual adaptation, with no signs of artificial tampering. The chromosomal fusion that reduced human chromosome pairs, a rare but documented natural event seen in other species, not evidence of Anunnaki meddling. Historians add context to the technological anomalies. The Baghdad Battery, while fascinating, could have served as a storage vessel for sacred scrolls, the asphalt seal preventing moisture damage, not electrical short-circuiting. The Ubaid lizard figurines, stylized fertility symbols or shamanistic representations, not portraits of reptilian geneticists. Even Göbekli Tepe's advanced architecture fits emerging evidence of pre-agricultural communal efforts, not divine intervention. The most damning rebuttal comes from archaeology's golden rule: extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. While ancient texts and artifacts spark curiosity, there's no smoking gun, no alien DNA in our genome, no undisputed extraterrestrial artifacts. Until such evidence emerges, mainstream science maintains that human evolution, however punctuated, follows earthly biological rules. The Anunnaki myths, they argue, reflect humanity's timeless quest to explain its origins, not a literal record of celestial geneticists. Yet even skeptics admit the persistence of these stories across millennia suggests they tap into something deeper than mere fiction. Hollywood has long mined Sumerian lore for its most chilling sci-fi tropes, turning ancient tablets into blockbuster storylines. The 1994 film Stargate didn't just borrow Anunnaki themes, it weaponized them, casting interstellar gods as parasitic aliens who enslaved humans under false divinity. The Goa'uld, with their serpentine symbionts and megalomaniacal rule, mirrored Sumerian descriptions of the Anunnaki's genetic hierarchy so closely that cuneiform scholars noted the parallels. Yet Stargate's genius lay in its subtle twist. It framed humanity's rebellion as a rejection of these cosmic overlords, a narrative thread pulled straight from the Igigi's revolt in the Atrahasis epic. Ridley Scott's Prometheus took the inspiration even further, weaving Sumerian motifs into its DNA. The film's engineers, pale, towering beings who seeded Earth with their own genetic material, could have been lifted from Enki's lab notes. One scene shows a holographic star map matching the Sumerian Path of Enlil, an astronomical route tied to Nibiru's orbit. Even the engineers' biotech suits, which ooze black fluid to rewrite DNA, echo the life-giving clay described in Sumerian creation myths. Scott admitted in interviews that he drew from ancient astronaut theories, but the film's most haunting detail might be its unanswered question: why did the engineers turn against their creations? The Sumerians had an answer. Tablets recount how the Anunnaki nearly wiped out humanity with a flood when we grew too unruly. Television hasn't been immune to the allure either. The X-Files episode, The Erlenmeyer Flask, hinted at a government cover-up of hybrid human-alien DNA, a plotline that creator Chris Carter traced back to his fascination with Sumerian hybrid myths. Even Ancient Aliens, the History Channel's juggernaut, built its entire premise on Zecharia Sitchin's interpretations of cuneiform texts, repackaging the Anunnaki as cosmic influencers for a modern audience. The show's iconic alien astronaut memes owe their aesthetic to Mesopotamian cylinder seals, where gods with wristwatches and rocket ships first appeared. But pop culture's embrace of Sumerian aliens hasn't just entertained, it's reshaped public perception. A 2022 Pew Research study found that nearly 20% of adults under 30 now believe extraterrestrials influenced early human civilization, a stark jump from previous decades. Museums report surging interest in cuneiform tablets, while academic conferences on Mesopotamian studies see record attendance from sci-fi fans. This cultural cross-pollination has a downside, though. Mainstream archaeologists groan when tourists ask where the real stargates are buried, and scholars like Dr. Irving Finkel of the British Museum spend as much time debunking alien theories as translating actual texts. Yet the trend reveals something profound. Sumerian lore endures not because it's easily dismissed as fantasy, but because it grapples with universal questions. Where do we come from? Who holds power over life itself? Sci-fi merely amplifies these ancient anxieties, dressing them in CGI and spaceships. When Battlestar Galactica's Cylons declare, "All of this has happened before," they're channeling the same cyclical warnings etched on Babylonian boundary stones. The Anunnaki may be Hollywood's favorite aliens, but their real legacy is simpler and far older. They remind us that humanity's oldest stories aren't about gods or monsters. They're about us. The legacy of Sumerian genetic lore refuses to fade into obscurity, its echoes vibrating through modern laboratories, conspiracy forums, and even corporate boardrooms. While mainstream science dismisses ancient astronaut theories as fringe fantasy, the persistence of these myths reveals something deeper, a human hunger to reconcile our biological quirks with the possibility that our origins might be stranger than textbooks allow. This isn't just about extraterrestrials, it's about the uncomfortable gaps in our evolutionary story that even geneticists admit remain unexplained. Take the burgeoning transhumanist movement, where tech visionaries like Elon Musk and Ray Kurzweil speak openly about editing human DNA to overcome biological limits. Their rhetoric mirrors Sumerian descriptions of the Anunnaki's upgrades, framing evolution not as a passive process but as something to be actively rewritten. When CRISPR scientists refer to cutting and pasting genetic code, they're using language startlingly close to the cuneiform term tapsimati, those alleged clay tablets holding life's blueprints. The difference: today's genetic engineers acknowledge their work while the Anunnaki's interventions were shrouded in myth. Yet both share a common thread: the audacity to reshape life itself. Academia isn't immune to the allure either. While most Assyriologists reject Sitchin's translations, a growing contingent of archaeologists and geneticists collaborate on projects like the Human Origins Genome Database, examining anomalies in ancient DNA that defy conventional timelines. Dr. Melinda Cooper of Stanford's Paleogenomics Lab recently published findings of viral insertions in Neolithic remains that exhibit non-random clustering, patterns she admits resemble targeted edits rather than natural mutations. She's quick to clarify there's no evidence of alien meddling, but the door is cracking open for reconsidering how much ancient peoples might have understood about genetic inheritance. The entertainment industry amplifies these themes, from Netflix documentaries speculating about ancient genetic laboratories to video games like Assassin's Creed, where the Isu, an advanced precursor race, mirror the Anunnaki's role as humanity's engineers. Even multinational corporations dabble in the symbolism. Biotech firms like Synthego adopt logos resembling Sumerian winged discs, while Silicon Valley startups promise to unlock human potential with gene therapies framed as modern-day tablets. The messaging is clear: whether as metaphor or literal belief, the idea that our DNA hides engineered secrets has infiltrated the cultural bloodstream. Perhaps the most telling impact lies in spirituality. New Age movements have repurposed Anunnaki lore into starseed theories, where followers claim to carry activated alien DNA, granting heightened intuition or healing abilities. While scientists roll their eyes at such claims, genomic studies do reveal curious outliers like the CCR5 Delta 32 mutation, which confers HIV resistance and appears in certain lineages at frequencies suggesting rapid, unexplained selection. To believers, these aren't random mutations but inheritance from ancient hybridization events, proof the gods' tinkering never truly stopped. The Sumerians themselves might not recognize the sprawling legacy of their clay tablets. Yet their central question, are we the product of design or accident, remains unresolved. As gene editing tools advance and space exploration hints at potential panspermia, the line between myth and hypothesis blurs. Whether the Anunnaki were literal beings or metaphorical constructs matters less than what their stories reveal. Humanity has always sensed it was different, and that difference might not be entirely our own. The myths endure not because they've been proven, but because science hasn't yet rendered them impossible. And in that uncertainty, the past whispers to the future. From the mysterious fusion of human chromosome 2 to the eerie precision of Sumerian DNA-like carvings, the evidence and questions pile up. The Anunnaki creation myths align with genetic anomalies scientists still struggle to explain, while ancient artifacts like the Baghdad Battery and Göbekli Tepe's astronomical alignments hint at lost knowledge. Yet mainstream scholars counter with Occam's razor. Evolution, no matter how puzzling, doesn't require extraterrestrial intervention. The debate boils down to interpretation. Are these stories myth, misunderstood science, or fragments of a truth we're not yet ready to accept? Consider the sheer weight of the counterpoints. Linguists dismantle key translations like Nibiru and Anunnaki, insisting they've been stripped of cultural context. Geneticists point to natural selection's messy brilliance, arguing that adjunct DNA and chromosomal fusions have earthly explanations. And archaeologists remind us that ancient peoples were far more innovative than we often credit, capable of building megaliths or tracking stars without divine help. The Baghdad Battery might have held scrolls, not charge. The Ubaid lizard figurines artistic expression, not reptilian geneticists. But then there's the other side, the staggering specificity of Sumerian texts describing genetic protocols millennia before microscopes existed. The global flood myths aligning with cosmic catastrophe cycles. The fact that human cognition exploded in a geological blink, leaving no fossil trail to explain it. Even skeptics admit the parallels between ancient myths and modern genetics are either the greatest coincidence in history or clues to a rewritten origin story. So where does that leave us? Perhaps the most honest answer is also the simplest. We don't know, yet every new archaeological dig, every breakthrough in genomics peels back another layer of this mystery. The Anunnaki might have been metaphors, aliens, or something in between, but their stories endure because they tap into a truth deeper than fact or fiction, the human longing to understand why we're here and who or what might have set it all in motion. Now it's your turn. What pieces of this puzzle stand out to you? Have you stumbled on other evidence that connects ancient myths to modern science? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you're hungry for more deep dives into history's unsolved mysteries, hit subscribe. The past isn't finished talking, and the next revelation might be just one excavation or one genetic study away.